I pay respect to the past, present, and future leaders. Welcome to Disability Sausage Media, the top online TV station where we reduce ableism in order to include everyone in society. This is a platform where we like life to be just simple, just like eating a sausage. In today's episode, I'm very delighted to have gone to one of the counties in Nyeri, to be specific, where I'm meeting one of the top line influencers in Kenya, a person. Hey, Karen, my good friend, how are you?
I'm very fine, thank you.
Wow, pleasure meeting you. She's the top autistic individual in the country, Kenya, around East Africa, and she holds a lot of influences in terms of issues around technology, disability awareness, and today I'm very delighted myself as the presenter, Paul Mugambi, if you may like call me Mpofu number one, and I'm very delighted. Welcome to the show, Karen, once again.
Thank you so much.
And kindly introduce yourself to the viewers and tell us about yourself.
I am Karen Muriuki. I am autistic. I hold various positions, but I will just keep it very brief. I am the Enable Africa influencer. I'm the Disability Inclusion Facilitator, certified by the way, now working with Sense International, and just recently I now work as a neurodiverse consultant at Ubongo TV. And as well, since I'm already here in Karatina, in Nyeri County, in my capacity as the organizing secretary for the Differently Talented Society of Kenya.
Wow, fantastic. You have so many roles, and for us as a Disability Sausage Media, would be interested to see or to hear from you your personal experience as an autistic adult, how you grew up, especially in this Nyeri County, and what do you think the community should learn from you?
I grew up, although I was born and raised in Nairobi, Nyeri County is my second home because, as you know, my dad was born and raised especially in Othaya, Nyeri. And the people in Nyeri are very hospitable and very amazing. To get to how my life story with being autistic has been, I was diagnosed in 1985. At that time, autism was not commonly known at that time. It was known as moderate to severe mental retardation, which is not a good word to describe autistic people in general. And how my family took that was a very mixed reaction. You find that one caregiver was accepting, the other until now has never fully embraced the idea that they have an autistic loved one in their nuclear family. In terms of my schooling, I could pretty say it has been quite a challenge because, as you know, I was in a regular school. And when you're in a regular school and you being autistic is very difficult. You find that, the teachers and students don't seem to understand who you really are. And they would really take advantage of you in the worst ways possible. So for me, it was a very tough experience growing up, especially as a child, because you find that people don't know and don't understand you. Even now as an adult, I can tell you still, there are a lot of barriers that I still face within my adult life because now, as you already know, now that I only have one surviving caregiver among me, now that I've lost one of my caregivers, I have to really figure out what is the best way that I could build relationship with other people who are around me, who still, unfortunately, until now, have never embraced the fact that they have a neurodiverse child in their own family, and especially somebody who is autistic.
Wow. Now, looking at that perspective, given that angle, what would you like to say about the perception, how people see in terms of our African society? Because Disability Sausage Media is watched all over the world, and they would like to know how people perceive, especially the autistic adults, in terms of their understanding, in terms of behavior or communication. How do you like to tell us?
In African societies, unfortunately, the perception of autistic people is extremely negative in that they still think that this person is very spoiled, indisciplined, evil. In some cases, they use words like evil, mad, and other words which are very, very ableist. So in that case, in a society because of how culture has been ingrained into some of these people to look at autism and other neurodiverse disabilities as something that should be cured and as people who are badly behaved. So if you look at how autistics are being perceived in a society, it is on a very negative scale. And if you can ask me how it has affected my mental health because of how my family usually uses their own cultural beliefs to impose on me, based on the fact that they have never embraced any autistic individual within their own family. So to sum it up, the perception of autistic people within our society has still been ingrained in a very negative light. That's perpetuating stigma.
Now, holding to that thought,
Yes.
there is this issue about the church and also
Yes.
talking about the charity model, issue of disability.
Yes.
And now we are heading towards the social or human rights based approach. What would you like to tell us in terms of the church issue in regard to disability, regards to how the perception has been, and heading towards the human rights based approach?
The church unfortunately needs to be well informed about disabilities because unfortunately, as we look at it from our own angle as persons with disabilities, the church hasn't played a very big role in inclusion of persons with disabilities in their congregation because they think that we are a people that are possessed by demons. In that case, that means when you bring people, especially those with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities into the fold, it means that they have not fully embraced the idea of disability mainstreaming in the church. So the church needs to play a very big role in embracing the human rights model of disability by ensuring that there's awareness creation and then embracing and including and accepting persons with disabilities as who they are, especially those with neurodiverse disabilities. These are the people who have faced the worst kinds of stigma and marginalizations within the church congregation.
Wow. Remember, this is a top online TV station, Disability Sausage Media, where we reduce ableism. And as we've heard from Karen, she's talking about us as a society, church, community to reduce ableism. And Karen, when you talk about this thing, there are several challenges or barriers in terms of around employment and education system, in terms of how it is inclusive.
Yes.
What is your opinion vis-a-vis putting into perspective the issue around the UNCRPD Article 24 about the Kenyan Constitution, such things in terms of addressing autistic children and persons with abilities in general?
I would say pretty much it has to be inside. We have to build capacity. The barriers that we still face in terms of employment, it is stigma number one, and lack of reasonable accommodations that employees with disabilities need. If you don't provide those accommodation, then an employee with disability cannot be able to survive on that job. So if you're not putting into place the various accommodations that they need, then they will not be able to survive on a job. You have to make sure that employees with disabilities can function very well by utilizing best practices, by allowing them to be within your office space, by building capacity. In order to address those barriers, we must look at to avoid those kind of barriers, to ensure that no person with disability is excluded from their daily lives. You talked about Article 24 of the UNCRPD. According to and how it has been implemented here in Kenya. Kenya is a signatory to the CRPD, but I don't see the country really implementing the convention because we are good at making laws, but we're not implementing those laws, especially with persons with disabilities. In the area of inclusive education, we had a disability education bill just passed, and I stated my viewpoints on whether or not it is inclusive to persons with disabilities. And when I looked at it very critically, it's still not in line with Article 24 of the UNCRPD, the SDG goals number 4, and general comment number 4, which is part of the UNCRPD. There's a lot that needs to be done to ensure that children with disabilities have a right to inclusive education. And what we see on the ground right now that has not been utilized. We're still finding that many autistic children are still being excluded from those schools because teachers don't want to, they think that these kids are going to pose a threat to them or they have a problem. So what we need to do now to break those barriers, to end the barriers that are hindering autistic children from accessing inclusive education, is to ensure that there's a lot of awareness creation and to use best practices in addressing inclusive education.
Wow. Now, Karen, there's an issue you've talked about, reasonable accommodation.
Yes.
And maybe in the many eyes of employers, because this is an issue as the social media or even research and studies have shown that
Yes.
many employers, they look on just physical accessibility,
Yes.
especially when they are trying to think what is reasonable accommodation. And as an autistic adult,
Yes.
what are some of the, at least give us 2 or 3 tips which you think that employers should consider for persons or for autistic adults who are seeking employment?
The 2 things that I would consider autistic adults, to be given accommodation to autistic adults, you have to address their sensory issues first. Make sure that your environment around the office space is very quiet. The lighting should be very minimal because we understand that many autistics really struggle with very bright lights. There are autistics who are sensitive to very bright lights. There are autistics who are sensitive to very loud noises. So if you have an assistive device, let's say a noise cancelling earplugs, provide that to your employee. Or if you don't have those facilities for noise cancelling headphones, then you have to take them to to a very quiet office that is very far away from a very crowded office space, and making sure that the lighting is extremely at its minimum. Autistic people prefer a very dimmed lighted place and a quiet area that is suited for them. And that means that employers must understand what autistics need, and they need to address these things.
Now, thank you very much for those tips, because I know that they are very educative, and I believe that many employers who are watching Disability Social Media, they have really learned or gotten a few tips from you. Now, as we get closer to closing this show for today, there's a very important issue around especially girls with autism or autistic girls.
Yes.
And you know that as a society, and I know that from different studies, different experience, when you talk about reproductive health for girls with disability is a big issue.
Yes.
What are some of the things you think that the society is doing good, or what are some of the bad practices which you think the society is doing, especially from that aspect of looking at autistic girls and women?
I think what I can pretty much say, within the society level, there's still a very big gap in addressing the needs of autistic women and girls in accessing reproductive health. They are not addressing the needs, especially we have autistic girls who cannot tell you that they have been abused. These are girls who are being taken advantage of. These are girls who have been eloping. And especially non-speaking autistic women and girls who cannot speak. They don't have a way of expressing themselves or telling you that, oh, this is what happened to me. This is what really happened to me. Somebody was violating me in a very horrific way. There's nothing. I just feel like there's a huge gap that the society is not addressing, especially to the plight of non-speaking autistic women and girls. And the society needs to be aware. They need to address this very commonly and just sit down. And it should be led by actual autistic women like myself, who in one way or another might be affected by what people have done to us. All autistic women and girls must have the same reproductive care as their non-autistic peers. So we need to address this very critically to just bridge the gap, especially among autistic women and girls in accessible reproductive care.
Wow, fantastic. Now, second last question.
Yes.
There's an interesting aspect that women and girls, or let's say autistic girls and women, are more coming out more than the men or the boys coming out even into activities.
Yeah.
And also you look at since we belong in the same organization, Different Talent Society of Kenya, we find that women and girls are more participatory. What would you like to tell adults, especially men and boys with autism, and also that aspect of male participation in terms of activities?
I think my message to autistic men and boys is, I know many of them are very introverted and they're very fearful of just telling them, just coming out. I would encourage each and every autistic man to come out, just like what we as autistic women and girls have done. We know we as autistic women have done a lot because we know from our own lived experiences what we go through on a daily basis. And it's the same thing that we need to address. It's the same thing that we encourage our autistic men and boys to come out. Share your lived experience. Don't be afraid. I know it's hard for many of them to come out because of how people are perceiving them, how their caregivers are still hiding them because of the attitudinal beliefs. So we need to really create that avenue where we can help our autistic men and boys to just come out, just like the way we as autistic women and girls have been coming out and sharing our experiences and also self-advocating for ourselves.
Wow.
Yes.
Now, Karen, what do you normally carry every day at your personal level, which you don't live at home?
On a personal level, I think I just carry that resilience, despite the many hurdles that my own family members have put those hurdles towards me because of the lack of understanding and acceptance. I just say it's the perseverance in my advocacy. I don't let anybody put me down because they don't like what I'm doing. I don't let it sink into me. It's the resilience that I have to keep me going.
Wow. Yes. So you have positive attitude and belief.
Yes, that's it.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Yes.
And as we close, you can face the camera and talk to that child with a disability, or talk to that adult with a disability, or even a caregiver with a disability,
yes,
just to encourage or get that note of really giving this person an encouragement.
I would encourage anyone listening to me right now, if you're a person with a disability, or if you're a caregiver who has a child with a disability, or if you are a caregiver with a disability, don't give up. Continue striving, continue self-advocating. I know it's a very difficult thing to do, but you have the resilience and you have the drive to do things that you obviously love. Don't let anybody put you down because they don't like what you're doing. You push yourself. It's part of your life. It is also helping you to be more confident in yourself, and especially with your mental health.
Remember, you're watching the top online TV station. Kindly subscribe 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 so that you can be able to get more information. And in case you'd like to support us, remember to look on the website www.disabilitysausagemedia.com. On the YouTube, we are at Disability Sausage Media YouTube, and also disabilitysausage@gmail.com. You will get us. Remember, this is a top online TV station. I have been your host, Paul Mugambi. If you may like, call me Mpofu number 1. And Karen, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And I hope to meet you once again.
Yes.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you, listeners and viewers.